Hi gang, what's up? Hope you guys are having a good morning, and thanks for taking out a few minutes and checking out the video this morning, man. Much appreciated. Just dropped Elijah off at daycare. I'm heading back down to Grand Lake to start our second day of practice this morning and try to get something figured out. Slow day yesterday and down there, but today's a new day and nothing counts until the tournament starts Thursday. But man, yesterday, Kim and I, yesterday evening, we got our first COVID shot, that Moderna shot, and man, my arm feels like a 5-pound bumblebee hit me or something. It's pretty sore this morning, but we go back in a couple weeks and get our second one there, so I'm glad to get that taken care of. But today I'm gonna share with you guys a few teachings from Albert Einstein that, in my opinion, it totally says everything about bass fishing. Not only it says everything about bass fishing, but it's probably the most applicable statements I have ever heard as far as allowing you to become a better angler. And today I'm just going to share with you one of them and explain to you why it applies to bass fishing and how important it is. But actually, Einstein, if you guys have read much on him, he has got a lot of teaching that you can apply to your fishing. Unbelievable. I mean, it's just amazing how it's connected to that. So we're going to share that with you guys today, one of them. But hey, before we get started, just want to remind you guys, tonight at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, Johnny and I have our weekly podcast on Fish the Moment Live, the Fish the Moment Live YouTube channel. It's going to be a good time, man. I hope you guys can join us. I'm going to be, practicing until like 5 o'clock and driving back and joining Johnny for the podcast tonight. So I hope you guys can join us for the Fish the Moment Live podcast tonight. Largest live bass fishing podcast in the country. So anyway, let's get into what I'm going to talk about here, a little bit about what Einstein said, how it applies to fishing. And you guys have probably heard this quotation before, but one of Einstein's quote was that he says imagination is more important than knowledge, simply because knowledge has a limitation on what you can get on it, and imagination doesn't. And man, I'm telling you guys right now, that quote right there is so true in fishing, and I'm going to explain to you why that is. Bass fishing, like I said, I said it once, and you're going to hear me say it a lot if you guys stay with me in these videos moving forward. Bass fishing is the most complicated, complex, difficult sport in the world because you simply have so many variables to it. You have there's an intellectual knowledge that you have to gain with the sport as far as to get a basic understanding of it. You have to, and that knowledge comes in the form of, like, you can get a basic foundation of fish behavior, fish movement, seasonal patterns, the things that fish like to bite during different times of the year, certain colors that work good under certain different sky conditions and water clarity conditions. You can get knowledge on equipment, how to use equipment, like what size of trebles to use. You don't use a number 6 treble hook on a big deep diving crankbait. That's intellectual knowledge that you go to a bigger hook. But when you get past that knowledge base that is something that you can learn, you get into the realm of the abstract a little bit, where imagination and creativity becomes, it overrides knowledge is what it does. And imagination and creativity, they sort of go hand in hand, in my opinion, in bass fishing. And I'm going to give you guys some examples of that. First of all, when you're talking about like different techniques and different baits and stuff like that, there's very few truly innovative new things that come out there. Most everything out there is some type of a modification of an existing idea that basically has come through creativity or imagination, that type of stuff. I mean, all the improvements we've seen on crankbaits and jerk baits and jigs and and rod and reels and all that type of stuff, that was basically initially a thought in somebody's mind that physically manifested. It wasn't due to knowledge or anything. It was due to creativity and imagination. And it's the same with technique or how you approach fishing or lure techniques. And for example, I have got, and anyone like myself, anybody that's out there that's been fishing for 40 plus years, we have a lot of intellectual knowledge in bass fishing. I mean, we do. I mean, I can sit there and I can tell you where fish should be, and I can tell you the best parts of the lake and all that type of stuff and where those bass should be. But ultimately, that doesn't mean anything, because when you get out there on the lake, you have to make changes and you have to adapt to the circumstances. And most of the time, if you try to intellectualize an adaptation, you're going to fail doing that. But a lot of times, if you use your imagination and your creativity, that's when you can excel. Here's an example I'll give you guys. And this, because it's applicable to Grand Lake. I was fishing a tournament on Grand Lake. It's been about probably, 15 years ago or so, maybe 20 years ago. And it was a May tournament. The water was up in the bushes, flooded, and I was catching them flipping. And in practice, I was catching them, pretty decent on just a black and blue. Actually, I was using a black jig with a blue pork frog. They still made blue pork frogs back then, but this was also the time when they still had the plastic chunks like the Zoom, big salty chunk. It was sort of that time frame when you had both available out there. And anyway, I'd been catching them pretty good on the black jig with the blue pork frog. And as the tournament progressed, the water started cleaning up a little bit, and they wouldn't bite that thing. So I started switching up some different colors and everything, and through experimentation. And I just, I started putting like a green pumpkin trailer. I went to more of a natural jig with a green pumpkin trailer. Didn't do any good. Went through the whole process, put the chartreuse pitch, dipped it in the chartreuse, didn't do any good. And I had never done it before, but I took the green pumpkin trailer and I dipped half of it blue dye and started catching them. And, that was just something that I just thought, and I didn't have any intellectual reason to try that. I was just trying something, out of the blue that I thought might work. The same deal with like what I've seen in a lot of co-angler situations, guys. Man, I can tell you guys so many stories about me fishing with co-anglers over the years that didn't know much about fishing. These guys didn't know hardly anything about fishing, and they kicked my butt out of the back of the boat because they were trying stuff just out of their own imagination that they thought might work. I mean, I remember this one, and I've told this story before because I couldn't believe it, but I was fishing this FLW tournament down at the Harris Chain, several years ago. And down in Florida, pretty much in the Harris Chain, the water's dirty down there, so everybody uses like black and blues, June bugs, that type of stuff. And I was flipping lily pads in that particular tournament. Water was pretty dirty. You only had, maybe 8 to 10 inches of visibility. And anyway, I was flipping, some big creature baits, June bug, black and blue, and that type of stuff. And we get out there the first morning of the tournament, and it was pretty thick. I mean, it's pretty thick lily pads. So I was flipping like a 3/8 ounce sinker in these lily pads, with those creature baits. We get out there that first morning of the tournament, and my partner pulls out there. He pulls out a watermelon trick worm, Zoom trick worm, that had a chartreuse tail on it. And the water was so dirty, and he had an 1/8 of an ounce sinker on the thing, which, you can flip pads with an 1/8 ounce sinker. That's not uncalled for. But anyway, this watermelon worm he had with the chartreuse tail on it, when he put it in the water, it just disappeared. The water was so dirty and that watermelon seed was so translucent that it's like, it just disappeared. And when I first saw him pull that worm out, I'm like, that guy's not going to get a bite on that. I'm telling you guys, no lie, within the first 15 minutes we're out there, he had a limit in the boat in 15 minutes on that thing, and I hadn't had a bite. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, it was just, that's a prime example about being creative and using your imagination to offset knowledge. I mean, I had all this intellectual knowledge that, black and blue and June bug is going to work. And, you know, he just tried something out of his own imagination that he didn't know anything. He didn't know that they shouldn't hit a watermelon seed worm in dirty water. He just tried it. Same goes with technique. I mean, all the deals. I mean, look at the Alabama rig, for example. I mean, the Alabama rig is a prime example of somebody that used their imagination, their creativity to come up with a lure to catch fish off of that, you know, you can't really intellectualize why it works. So I guess the point of what I'm trying to take here, without, you know, just rambling on in a far-ranging deal, is that when you're out there fishing, guys, and you get a hunch or you get an intuition, as the channel's name, intuitive angling, if you get a feeling or an intuition, just take 10 or 15 minutes out there to act on that. Don't second guess it. Just drop what you're doing. If you think a certain color is going to work, or if you think, you know, trying something, you know, a completely different area, you know, from what you're doing ought to work, even though it may, you know, seem way out in left field, just go with it. You know, don't you know, hold back on it, because a lot of times, you know, just the fear of the unknown or fear of trying something new is a huge limitation for you. So the best advice I can give you on that, relating back to Einstein's quote on imagination is more important than knowledge, is that trust your instincts, trust your intuition when you're out there and you're fishing, because that's how you're going to transcend everybody else. If it was just a matter of us going fishing and the people that did the best in fishing were the ones that had the most experience and the most knowledge, then, you know, guys like, you know, Roland Martin and Rick Clunn and those guys that have fished longer than anybody else, they'd be unbeatable because they simply have accumulated more knowledge out there. But, you know, why is it that somebody can go out there and outperform Roland Martin, who's got, you know, 60 years of hardcore tournament fishing, and, you know, you put him up against like a 18-year-old kid that won the college national championship, that's got 5 years of fishing under his belt? How is it possible for that 18-year-old kid to be somebody like Roland Martin that's won, you know, 20 tournaments and, you know, caught literally a million bass? That is when you see how important intuition and creativity and imagination are. Because like I said, if those weren't factors that were more important than knowledge, then you'd never beat the guys that are veterans, the guys that have the most experience on it. So anyway, just a few thoughts for today, guys. Like I said, I'm going to do more on this, because this whole, you know, the whole mental part of bass fishing to me is the most important part. And this is, you know, when you're talking about imagination and knowledge, this is another mental aspect of the sport. It's not something about telling you what, you know, color or crankbait to use or something like that. It's more of an abstract thing. So we'll be back with some more Einstein quotes. He's got several more out there that are very pertinent to fishing, but I just wanted to share that with you guys. Next time you're out there, you know, be creative, use your imagination, try something that most people think would never work, and more than not, a lot of times it winds up working. So anyway, I hope that helps you guys catch a few more fish, and I'm going to get down here to Grand Lake and see if I can, you know, put some imagination to work myself today. So anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. See you.